Hi guys, what's up? Today we are joined by Gregu, or I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Grogu, but Gregu sounds cuter. It's from The Mandalorian, Baby Yoda, Star Wars, if you don't know. Um, Anyways, today I wanted to talk in this video about something that every reader loves doing, almost as much as they love reading. Which is recommending books or getting recommended books of other people's 5-star read in different genres just so they can experience someone else's joy or they can give someone else something that they loved absolutely from a book. Or every book that I'm going to talk about today is at least a 4-star read, the most. Like everything is 4 and above. Most of them are 5-star reads. I want to say potentially one of them is a 6-star read, but I'm not really sure just because I'm still new in experiencing books, if that makes sense, and reading them and like trying to see what I'm really into. But I did want to recommend books and romance books just because Valentine's was like 3 days ago, I think, and I thought it would be kind of fun to recommend romance books for the month of February. Jumping straight into it, the first book I have here is The Sun is Also a Star by Nicole Yoon. Yoon? I'm pretty sure I said that right. But this book is following Natasha and Daniel. And Natasha is someone who doesn't really believe in love. So she's never really had that feeling of being in love or falling in love or loving someone in a relationship. She also is moving, so she has to go in town and she has to get some stuff before she moves. Daniel is someone who believes in fate, and he's more of a dreamer in his family, so he's a little outside of the box, more creative in that way, I guess you would say. So he definitely believes in love and fate and stuff like that, and they had kind of a meet cute. They met, I think, at a bookstore or a record store. It's been a while since I've read this book, but they met and there was like a gravitational pull towards each other without them really seeing it until they started talking more and it just got stronger. So he was just trying the entire time to really make her to believe in love, and the whole goal or the whole point of this book was him trying to make her fall in love with him, if that makes sense. And she was just going along with it because, oh wait, hold on, is she the one that's moving or is he the one that's moving? I don't even remember. Like it's really been a long time, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of the plot of the book. I did really enjoy this. It was really fast paced. It's dual POV. I really loved the book. It's a book that I got as a gift, and I think I finished it in like a weekend. It was really enjoyable. I don't even remember ever wanting to put this book down. So I would recommend it to anyone who's getting into romance or loves young adult and loves fast pace. Someone who is really into reading could probably finish in like a day or two. So it's really easy to read, and I loved the way the author did this book. I know there was a movie on it. I've never seen it. So yeah, correct me if I'm wrong about who's moving. If you have seen it, but that's pretty much what this book is about, and I really did love the way the author wrote the outline of this book. The next book I have is The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. This book was really freaking good. I think I read it in like less than 20 hours. I could not put this book down. I started it on a Saturday and I finished it I think Sunday morning, and this book was really freaking good. It was fast paced. I honestly could not put this book down. Literally page 1, she had me laughing from the start. I did decide to tab this book, and if you know, you know, I crinkle plastic every time I touch it, and yeah, I just want to like cut down every tab that I have, but you know, it is what it is. I really did love this book. It is more of an adult romance, and the whole plot in this book is that Catalina, her sister, is getting married to her ex's brother. So her ex is gonna be there at the wedding, and everyone in her family found out that her ex got a fiance. And everyone thought that after her and her ex broke up, like, she had broken, but really it was the situation. Well, you find out that it's the situation and how everything happened and went down that really broke her, and not really him herself itself, if that makes sense. So, you know, if you're Hispanic, you know, everyone in your family just kind of talks down or like pities you if something happens to you, and it like overpowers the whole situation on most things. So that's kind of what happened with her. She works, obviously she works, but this is a workplace romance. She has a rival, so this is enemies to lovers in that field, and they're not even competing for the same field, but they met and it wasn't really that great. So from the beginning of him starting to work there, it just went downhill from there. They just started hating each other. He's like on her blacklist. His name is Aaron, and he's the one that suggested that he would be her boyfriend just because he also needed her to be her fake date, to be his fake date. Yeah. So that progresses very nicely. Elena Armas is so good with slow burn, I will not lie. I love the way Elena Armas writes her love stories. And honestly, this book was really good. And I couldn't put it down. I would recommend it to anyone who is in love with romance and really does like romance. It's just a really good book. It's super fast paced. I finished it so fast, which is surprising for me, so I would recommend this book to anyone. It was really enjoyable. I also gave this book 5 stars. I don't know if I ever mentioned that, but yeah. The next book I have is Collide by Bal Cabra. This book is a college romance following Summer and Aiden. Summer is a sports psychology major. She loves any sport but hockey, and you learn why later on, but she has a bad history with hockey. And her professor is forcing her to do a study on a hockey player, which ends up being Aiden, the captain of the hockey team, because it's like a punishment that he has to go through. They didn't meet so great, so at first they were kind of reluctantly working together, but eventually they became friends, and they were friends for like a good month and a half, I want to say, until they honestly started talking about their feelings for each other, and then it became progressively really good. It is open door and closed door romance, so I really like that because it wasn't too much and it was very equally good with the plot, and then their relationship with talking, and they had great communication. I really did love this book. It was so easy to read. It was also my 5-star read for January and my book of January, just because I didn't really have any other book that gave me this feeling that this book did. And yeah, I would recommend this book to anyone who's really starting to get into reading as well, just because it's a really easy book to follow through. The text is pretty decent, and the book feels so nice. Like, I was gonna say it's weird, but it's like a weird good, like a good weird. Yeah. Yeah, if you know what I mean. The next book I wanted to recommend, I don't have in the moment because I'm letting one of my friends borrow it, but it's called The Ash Princess by Laura Sebastian. That book is a fantasy romance book. It's more into the fantasy aspect, but it's following Theodosia, and her country was overthrown by the Calivaxians when she was like 6 years old, so that was like 10 years ago. She's now 16, and she starts an uprising with her guardians on basically trying to figure out a plan to leave and escape, so then she can come back with an army to get her country back, which you don't really get that part until later on because it's a trilogy, but it is something that's spoken about a lot in the book because that's the whole goal, trying to get her country back and saving her people. I say that this is a romance, or that I can add this because it's a subplot. It is a love triangle because she is trying to kind of, I don't want to say seduce, but she's trying to make the prince of the Calivaxians basically like her enemy. So it's like kind of a Romeo and Juliet thing there. She's trying to make him like go on her side, but really go against his father and, you know, her enemy, I guess. And then she also has an old crush of, like, you know, your childhood romance or like childhood crush that you have. He's thrown back into the mix, and he's also someone that's super sweet, and they have a thing, and there's just like, there's definitely a big love triangle that she has to battle through, with in between mainly focusing on the fantasy of trying to get alliances, over figuring out ways to overthrow the kingdom and get her country back. And yeah, I think it's a really good fantasy romance. It is more of a fantasy, I want to say, just because there's only a couple kiss scenes. I think there's like 3, but it's more of the talking that makes it like a fantasy, if that makes sense, or like makes it like a romance, if that makes sense. It is a young adult, young wow. It is a young adult, so it's very easy, very fast paced. It's not super heavy, so I feel like this book is really good for anyone who's getting into reading and wants to get into fantasy or wants to get into romance, or trying to get more than just romance, like romance and sci-fi, romance and science or something, or romance and fantasy. So, or romance and thriller, like, it's just something that I think would be easy, really easy to follow through getting into as a young adult. The next book, oh, I also did rate that book. Why do I always forget to like mention the rating of the books? So I also did rate that book 5 stars, only because I've read it 3 times and every time I've loved it and I've never gotten bored each time I've read it. So I find myself really loving that book just because it's a book that really got me into fantasy in general. Yeah. That's why I would recommend it, just because it's the book that kind of got me into reading and got me into fantasy, or that fantasy world of every single fantasy book that you've seen. Yeah. The next book I have is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This book is a book that many people have talked about on Book Talk on any platform, and I feel like for good reason, because this book was honestly so good. It had me hooked from like page 40, and I did not want to put it down. I found myself thinking about it all the time, going to sleep thinking about it, waking up thinking about it, wanting to read it like whenever I have free time. And I read it pretty fast too. This is a pretty thick book, but compared to her second one, not really. I did give this book 5 stars as well. I think all the books that I've mentioned so far have been 5 stars for me. This was my 2023 book of the year, just because I only read a selective few books, but this book was a book that got me back into reading and really got me into that slump that I felt like I just couldn't read anymore. But really, this book was like, no, you're wrong, you love reading, and this is just a reminder. It was so easy, it was fast paced. It is an enemies to lovers, which I love the detail that Rebecca Yarros gets into. She is a romance writer, and this was her first try at fantasy, and I'm just shocked that it took her so long to get into it, because this was amazing. I find myself thinking about it at least once or twice a day, or sometimes every other day. It's just something that really rocked my world and got me back into reading, hence me making this video right now, or in general making videos. But it's following Violet. She is someone that is forced to go into the writer's quadrant, which you have to be very athletic to be a part of, because if you die, you die. Like, no one cares. She's forced to get in there, and she's not athletic at all. She's actually very smart, very well read, and she's very book smart. So her having to do this was kind of hard and very shocking for her to stay alive for so long. So I really loved the way that they did this. I'm back. I kind of forgot where I was talking about this book, but it was super easy for me to read. I feel like this book would be amazing for anyone who loves fantasy or really wants to get into fantasy and also really wants to get into romance or also loves romance. If you're or like both of those categories, I think you would really love Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. The next book I have is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas, also known as ACOTAR. This book is well known all over the world. She's an amazing author. I've only read the first book to the ACOTAR series so far, so I'm newly in jumping into Sarah J Maas's world, but we are following Farah, who ends up killing a wolf that she thinks is an ordinary wolf, but is a part of the fairy court, which she obviously doesn't know which court is in. But the High Lord of the Spring Court, Tamlin, he ends up giving her an option of either getting killed or going back to his Spring Court for the rest of her days, because it was like a part of their treaty that they had. She ends up going. At first, when I was reading this book, I didn't know, but this is a Beauty and the Beast romance. Or it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I didn't find out until after I had read the book. So I do really recommend this book. It's super easy to read. I did give this book 4 stars just because it took me a little longer to get into, and it was different for me to read just in general, and it was a lot writing into this book, so I guess when you're expecting so much, it kind of makes you have a different mentality. But I do really recommend this book to anyone who ever wants to get into romance, because it's a big part of this book, but it's also a fantasy book. You can get the best of both worlds with this book. The last book that I have that I wanted to suggest is a book I haven't even finished yet, but it's called The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. It's a part of the Dreamland Billionaire series, and I am like 100 pages into this book, but I am loving it so far, and that is why I want to suggest it to anyone who wants to read it, because it's an amazing romance. Like, so far, I'm just really falling in love with Rowan and Zara. What I've learned is that Rowan has a late grandpa, and he had left the letters to the 3 brothers. Rowan is the youngest brother, and he has to do something because he's like the dreamer or the creative one out of the 3 brothers, but that was when he was a kid. So the grandpa, I feel like, is trying to bring back their old spirits or passions from when they were starting up into his company, which they do really want to own his company, and for the next 6 months they reluctantly have to do the task that their grandpa told them to. If not, they're going to give it to it. He's going to give the company to his father, which is not a good thing that's going to happen because his father is just not it. Zara, she is a character that is very lighthearted, very fluffy, kind of like the opposite of Rowan, because Rowan's very like strict and very like, I don't know, he's a god at deadpan, if you know what I mean. And she's a very sunshiny person. She takes everything with a grain of salt, I feel like is it the right thing to say. And so far, she just became one of the creators in the Dreamland business that he's in. So I'm really excited to read this, but I feel like I'm gonna love this book. It's been so easy to read, super fast paced, and I don't know if it's young adult or if it's adult romance, but so far I'm loving the romance with the 2 characters. They did just kiss, so we'll see how that goes. And yeah, I would definitely recommend this book and the series just because I'm really starting to love it, and I just started the book, so that tells you a lot about the author and the book on itself. So those are pretty much all of the books that I wanted to recommend, just specifically in the romance genre, because, you know, it's the February love, like I've mentioned, it's a big thing, so I just felt like doing it. I thought it'd be fun. especially since I have a very different thought process. Every reader does whenever they come to talk about certain books. So yeah, those are the books that I would definitely recommend as romance as a subplot or main point or plot into a book. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.